The massive doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber groaned open with the weight of 1,000 civilizations. Commander Jake Morrison stood in chains, his torn uniform still bearing the insignia of Earth's first interstellar expedition. Blood trickled from a cut above his left eye, but his stance remained defiant. Around him, the circular chamber stretched upward into darkness, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Towering insectoid wrecks clicked their mandibles in disapproval. The crystalline Zephyrians hummed with frequencies that made Jake's bones ache. Aquatic dolphins floated in their biosuits, their tentacles writhing with what he assumed was contempt. At the center of it all sat High Counselor Thexvar, a being so ancient that his species had evolved beyond physical form. His energy field pulsed with colors Jake had never seen before. Human. Thexvar's voice resonated directly in Jake's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. You stand accused of the destruction of Research Station Kepler 442b and the deaths of 300 peaceful scientists. Jake lifted his chin, meeting the counselor's gaze despite the searing pain it caused. I've told you a dozen times, my ship malfunctioned. The explosion wasn't intentional. A ripple of what could only be described as alien laughter swept through the chamber. The sound was like glass breaking, metal scraping, and wind whistling all at once. Your primitive vessel's malfunction vaporized an entire moon, hissed Vrex Ambassador Kliktar, her 4 arms gesturing wildly. The research conducted there could have cured the crimson plague that ravages the outer rim. Humans, spat the Delphin representative, bubbles streaming from his translator. They spread chaos wherever they go. First contact protocols exist. For a reason. Jake's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, he'd been humanity's golden boy, first human to command an interstellar mission, chosen to make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Now he was apparently a mass murderer. The truth was far more complicated. His ship, the UES Endeavour, had indeed suffered a catastrophic failure. But it wasn't an accident. Someone, or something, had sabotaged his vessel's quantum drive. The explosion that followed had been massive, yes, but Jake had managed to evacuate the research station's personnel before impact. At least he thought he had. The evidence is clear, Thexvar continued, his energy form flickering with what Jake interpreted as finality. By galactic law, you must face trial by combat in the arena of judgment. If the universe deems you worthy of survival, you will live. If not... The chamber fell silent except for the constant hum of alien life support systems. Jake had heard whispers of the arena during his brief imprisonment. It was an ancient coliseum where the galaxy's most dangerous criminals faced creatures that defied imagination. Survival was considered miraculous. Victory was considered impossible. I accept, Jake said, surprising even himself with the steadiness of his voice. The guards, massive armored beings called sentinels, moved to escort him away. As they reached the chamber's exit, Jake turned back one last time. When I survive, this, he called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. I want answers. Real answers about what happened at Kepler 442b. Thexvar's energy field pulsed once, but he said nothing. As the doors closed behind them, Jake caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. In the viewing gallery reserved for distinguished observers, a figure in a hooded cloak watched his departure with interest. The figure wore the unmistakable insignia of Earth's colonial administration. Someone from his own species had been here, all along. Chapter 2. The Arena's Secret. The holding cells beneath the Arena of Judgment reeked of fear, desperation, and things Jake preferred not to identify. His cell was barely large enough to stand in, carved from some kind of black stone that seemed to absorb light and sound. For 3 days he'd been alone with nothing but a bowl of something resembling gruel and water that tasted of metal. The guards, different from the sentinels, these were smaller, more numerous, and spoke in rapid clicks and chirps, ignored his attempts at communication. On the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Jake woke to find someone watching him, through the energy barrier that served as his cell door. Not someone unmistakably human. Well, the figure said, stepping into the dim light. "Commander Jake Morrison, you're either very brave or very stupid to accept trial by combat." The speaker was a woman, perhaps 40 years old, with graying brown hair and scars that spoke of a lifetime of conflict. She wore civilian clothes, but something about her posture screamed military training. "Who are you?" Jake asked, moving to the barrier but careful not to touch it. He'd learned that lesson on day one. "Dr. Sarah Chen," she replied. "Former xenobiologist with the colonial administration, former being the operative word." Her smile was bitter. "I've been studying the arena for the past 2 years, learning its secrets. How did you get down here? Same way I'm going to get you out of here." She produced a small device from her pocket. "Quantum phase disruptor. Took me 6 months to build it from salvaged parts." The energy barrier flickered and died. Jake stared at her, suspicious. "Why help me? You don't even know me." "Because I know what really happened at Kepler 442b. Sarah's expression grew serious. "And more importantly, I know who was responsible." She gestured for him to follow her down the corridor. "The research station wasn't destroyed by accident, Jake. It was sabotaged. And the real target wasn't the station. It was you." They moved quickly through passages that Sarah seemed to know by heart. The walls here were different, older, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "The arena has been here for over 10,000 years, Sarah explained as they walked. "Built by a race called the Architects, who vanished before most current civilizations even developed spaceflight. The Galactic Council uses it as both execution chamber and entertainment, but they don't understand what it really is, which is a testing ground. The Architects were obsessed with finding the perfect warrior species. They built challenges designed to push different types of consciousness to their absolute limits. They reached a hidden chamber filled with ancient technology. Holographic displays showed the arena from dozens of angles, revealing its true scope. It wasn't just a coliseum, it was a vast, multi-dimensional maze that seemed to shift and change according to unknown rules. "The thing is," Sarah continued, manipulating the controls with practiced ease, "the Architects had a particular interest in one type of being. Creatures that fought not for themselves but for others. Beings driven by loyalty, by love, by bonds that transcend species." She called up another display, this one showing historical records of arena combat. Thousands of contestants over the millennia, most dead within minutes of entering. But a few, a very few, had not only survived, but had somehow changed the arena itself. Every one of these survivors had something the others lacked: a companion, a bondmate, someone they were fighting for rather than fighting against. Jake's hand unconsciously moved to his chest, where something small and metallic hung beneath his torn uniform. "My dog tags," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "I've been monitoring Galactic Council communications. They know about your tags, Jake. They know who gave them to you and what they represent. That's why they're so eager to see you die in the arena." The tags had been a gift from his daughter Emma before his departure from Earth. She'd had them specially made, one for him, one for her. "So we'll always be together, even when you're exploring the stars," she'd said. Emma had died in a transport accident 2 weeks after his departure. He'd learned about it 3 months into his mission, too far from Earth to return for her funeral. The sabotage of your ship, the destruction of the research station, even your capture. It was all designed to get you here to this moment, Sarah said. "Someone wants to see what happens when a human enters the arena carrying the memory of profound love and loss. But who? And why?" Before Sarah could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing. "Red, they've discovered your escape," Sarah said, grabbing a backpack from the corner of the chamber. "We need to move. Now." "Where?" "The only place they won't expect us to go." She smiled grimly. "Straight into the arena itself." As they ran toward what Sarah claimed was a maintenance entrance to the arena floor, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking directly into a trap. But whose trap was it? Chapter 3. The truth in combat, the arena floor was nothing. Like Jake had imagined, instead of sand or stone, the ground was composed of some kind of living material that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The walls rose impossibly high, disappearing into darkness above, but Jake could feel the weight of thousands of watching eyes. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, as they emerged from the maintenance tunnel. The arena responds to the emotions and intentions of those inside it. The architects designed it to create the perfect test for each contestant. As if summoned by her words, the ground beneath them began to shift. Walls of crystalline material erupted from the floor, creating a maze that seemed to rearrange itself. Even as they watched, "Jake Morrison." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the arena with such power that dust fell from the distant ceiling. It was not the voice of any alien species Jake had encountered. "I am the arena's consciousness," it continued. "For 10 millennia I have tested warriors from across the galaxy. None have interested me as much as you, human." A section of the maze wall became transparent, revealing the viewing galleries above. Thousands of beings from dozens of species watched with rapt attention. In the front row, Jake spotted the hooded figure from the council chambers. "Your test begins now," the arena announced. The maze wall solidified and something moved in the shadows ahead of them. Something large, with too many teeth and not enough mercy. "Nexar beast," Sarah breathed, raising what looked like an improvised weapon, a modified mining laser. Native to the Proxima sectors, they hunt by reading fear patterns in their prey's neural emissions. The creature that emerged from the shadows was a nightmare-given form. 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous plates that seemed to absorb light, with 6 arms ending in claws that could shred steel. Its head was elongated, eyeless, but filled with sensors that Jake could see tracking his movement. But as it approached, something strange happened. Jake felt the familiar weight of his dog tags against his chest, and suddenly he wasn't in an alien arena anymore. He was in Emma's hospital room reading her favorite story while she fought off another round of chemotherapy. He was teaching her to throw a baseball in their backyard. He was holding her hand as the transport's wreckage burned in the distance. The Nexar beast stopped dead in its tracks. "Impossible," came a voice from the viewing gallery. Jake looked up to see the hooded figure standing, their concealment falling away to reveal Admiral Patricia Reeves, Jake's commanding officer, the woman who had selected him for the first contact mission. "The neural pattern is completely wrong," she continued, speaking to someone Jake couldn't see. "Humans are supposed to register pure fear when facing a Nexar beast. This one is broadcasting love?" The arena's consciousness spoke again, but now its tone held something Jake hadn't expected. Curiosity. Fascinating. "The human's neural emissions do not match any pattern in my databanks. He faces death, yet his primary emotional state is protective grief?" The Nexar beast circled Jake and Sarah warily, its sensors clearly confused by the readings it was receiving. "Jake," Sarah whispered urgently, "whatever you're thinking about, keep thinking about it. The beast can't properly track prey that isn't afraid." But Jake was barely listening. The arena's words had triggered a memory, something about neural patterns and databanks that he'd heard before. 3 months ago, during his mission briefing on Earth. "The arena is more than a testing ground," Admiral Reeves had told him in private. "Our intelligence suggests it's actually a massive quantum computer, designed to map and catalog the consciousness patterns of every sentient species in the galaxy." At the time, Jake had assumed it was just another classified briefing that wouldn't affect his peaceful first contact mission. Now he realized it was the entire point of his mission. "You knew," he called up to Admiral Reeves, his voice carrying clearly in the arena's acoustics. "You knew I'd end up here, the sabotage, the explosion, it was all planned." Reeves stepped forward to the gallery's edge. "The survival of our species depends on understanding how consciousness works at a quantum level, Commander. The arena holds data on every known form of sentient life. If we could access that data, you'd have a roadmap to every alien mind in the galaxy," Jake finished. "Perfect intelligence for conquest." The Nexar beast, apparently deciding that confused was better than afraid, lunged forward with all 6 arms extended. Jake didn't even think. He pushed Sarah aside and dove toward the creature, not away from it. The move was so unexpected that the beast's claws whistled through empty air where his head had been a split second before. But Jake wasn't trying to fight the creature. He was trying to reach his daughter. The dog tags around his neck began to glow with soft, warm light. Not the harsh illumination of alien technology, but something that reminded Jake of Emma's nightlight, the one shaped like a star that she'd insisted on keeping even at age 12. The Nexar beast froze as if struck by lightning. Then impossibly it began to purr. "What is happening?" Admiral Reeves demanded from above. The arena's consciousness answered, and for the first time its voice held emotion. Wonder. The human is not fighting the test. He is transforming it. His consciousness pattern is rewriting the beast's behavioral matrix. The Nexar beast, still purring, gently nudged Jake with its massive head before curling up at his feet like an enormous, lethal cat. "Impossible," Reeves breathed. "Not impossible," said a new voice. "Inevitable." Jake spun to see another figure emerging from the maze. Tall, ethereal, with features that seemed to shift between every species Jake had ever seen. "I am the last of the architects," the being said. "I have waited 10,000 years for this moment." The arena around them began to change, walls dissolving, revealing the true scope of the ancient structure. It wasn't just a coliseum, it was a city, vast and beautiful, with towers that reached toward the stars. The arena was never meant to find the perfect warrior, the architect continued. It was meant to find the perfect teacher, a being capable of showing other species how to love instead of how to fight. Jake looked down at his glowing dog tags, then up at the thousands of alien faces watching from the galleries. "The test isn't over," he said quietly. "Is it?" The architect smiled. "Commander Morrison, the test has only just begun." In the viewing gallery, Admiral Reeves began frantically speaking into a communication device, but Jake could see that the other human observers were restraining her. Sarah moved to stand beside him, her improvised weapon forgotten. "So what happens now?" she asked. The architect gestured to the transformed arena around them. "Now humanity takes its first real step into the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as healers." The Nexar beast at Jake's feet opened one massive eye and looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. But in the shadows of the great city, other shapes were moving. The test might be changing, but Jake had the distinct feeling that the real challenge was yet to come. Chapter 4. The Price of Truth. The ancient city of the architects revealed its secrets slowly, like a flower blooming in reverse time. Jake walked through streets that had been empty for millennia, Sarah at his side, the reformed Nexar beast padding silently behind them. The architect glided ahead, its form shifting between solid matter and pure energy as they moved deeper into the city's heart. "Your species is young," the architect said without turning around. "But youth sometimes sees truth more clearly than age. My people spent eons trying to create the perfect warrior. We believed that strength through conflict was the path to galactic harmony." They entered a vast library where crystalline data cores stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Each core pulsed with the stored consciousness patterns of entire civilizations. "We were wrong," the architect continued. "Strength through love, through sacrifice for others. This is the path we never considered. Until we observed humanity." Jake stopped walking. "You've been watching us? For how long?" "Since your species first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone." The architect's form solidified, taking on features that were distinctly humanoid but somehow universal. "We watched you fight wars not for conquest, but to protect the innocent. We watched you risk everything to save companions who were not even your own species. We watched you grieve." The dog tags at Jake's chest pulsed with warm light, responding to his emotional state. "The bond between you and your daughter transcends death itself," the architect observed. "This is what my people never understood. Love creates quantum entanglement between consciousness patterns. It makes beings stronger, not weaker. Sarah had moved to one of the data cores, her scientist's curiosity overcoming caution. These patterns, they're not just memories, are they? They're actual consciousness backups. Every being who ever entered the arena left a part of themselves here, the architect confirmed, including those who died. The arena doesn't just test, it preserves. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Emma, my daughter, she was killed before she could leave Earth, but if consciousness can be preserved across space, the quantum entanglement created by deep emotional bonds operates beyond the constraints of distance and time, the architect said gently. Your daughter's pattern was preserved the moment your tags began to glow. Before Jake could fully process this revelation, alarms began echoing through the ancient city, through the libraries. Transparent walls, they could see ships descending from orbit, human ships bearing the insignia of Earth's colonial fleet. Admiral Reeves has called for backup, Sarah said grimly, checking her scanner. Looks like 3 destroyer-class vessels and a dreadnought. The architect showed no sign of concern. Your admiral believes she can claim the arena's secrets through force. She does not understand that the arena only reveals its knowledge to those who have proven worthy. But she's got enough firepower to level this entire city, Jake protested. Does she? The architect gestured toward the Nexar beast, which had moved to the library's entrance and was watching the descending ships with interest. Commander, would you be willing to extend the same protection to other species that you showed to the Nexar? Jake didn't hesitate. Of course. Then touch the central data core. Let the arena feel the full depth of your bond with your daughter. Jake approached the massive crystalline structure at the library's center. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire city erupted in light. But it wasn't the harsh, destructive light of human weapons. It was the soft, warm glow of Emma's, nightlight magnified 10,000 times. The light washed over the descending human ships and something incredible happened. The pilots stopped their attack runs. Ground troops ceased their preparations for assault. One by one, the human forces began broadcasting peaceful intentions. What did you do? Sarah asked in wonder. I showed them what they were really fighting for, Jake replied, understanding flooding through him. Not conquest. Not power. The chance to protect something precious. Through the communication arrays that the architect had somehow activated, Jake could hear transmissions from the human fleet. This is Captain Martinez of the destroyer Houston. Admiral, I'm not opening fire on what appears to be a peaceful first contact situation. I have a daughter back on Earth, and I won't risk starting a war that might reach her. This is Colonel Hassan of the ground forces. My orders are to stand down. Whatever's happening down there, it's not hostile. Admiral Reeves's voice crackled through the static, furious and desperate. This is a direct order. The survival of humanity depends on securing that technology. No, came another voice, one Jake recognized as Captain Williams, his former second-in-command. The survival of humanity depends on us being worthy of survival. The architect moved to stand beside Jake at the data core. Your species has passed the first test, Commander, but there are others who will not be so easily swayed. As if summoned by these words, new ships appeared in the sky above the arena city. Not human this time. These were the angular, predatory vessels of the Vrex hegemony, with the support ships of a dozen other aggressive species behind them. They've been monitoring our communications, Sarah said, reading her scanner with growing alarm. Half the galaxy's war fleets are converging on this position. The architect's expression grew somber. The knowledge contained in this city represents the greatest prize in galactic history. Many will kill to possess it. Jake looked around at the beautiful ancient city, at the Nexar beast that now regarded him as a friend, at Sarah who had risked everything to help him reach this moment. Then we don't let them have it, he said quietly. Jake? Sarah's voice was concerned. What are you thinking? He turned to the architect. You said the arena preserves consciousness patterns. Can it also release them? Understanding dawned in the ancient being's features. You would sacrifice your own chance at reunion with your daughter to deny the war fleets their prize? Jake's hand closed around his dog tags, feeling Emma's presence within them, like a warm flame. She wouldn't want me to choose her over the safety of others. That's not who I raised her to be, and it's not who she raised you to be, came a new voice, soft, familiar, impossible. Jake turned to see a figure forming from the light of the data cores. 12 years old, wearing the baseball jersey he'd bought her for her birthday, smiling, with the joy of someone who had found her way home. Emma. Hi, Dad. She moved toward him, her form solidifying with each step. I've been watching your adventure. You did good. Jake dropped to his knees as she reached him, pulling her into an embrace that felt completely real despite everything he knew about quantum physics and consciousness patterns. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have been there. I should have protected you. You did protect me, Emma said, pulling back to look at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her apparent years. You loved me completely. That love kept me safe even after my body couldn't anymore. She looked around at the ancient city, at the alien ships gathering in the sky above. But other kids need protection now. Other families. Jake understood. The knowledge in these data cores, if the wrong people get it, they'll use it to hurt people instead of help them, Emma finished. Just like they tried to use you. The architect watched their reunion with something like reverence. The choice is yours, Commander Morrison. The arena will obey either decision, preserve its knowledge for your species to claim, or scatter it harmlessly across the galaxy where no one can use it for conquest. Jake looked at his daughter, seeing himself reflected in her determined expression. What do you think we should do, kiddo? Emma smiled, the same smile that had brightened his mornings for 12 precious years. I think we should show the galaxy what humans are really good at, which is doing the right thing even when it's hard. Jake stood, keeping one hand on Emma's shoulder, and placed the other on the central data core. Release the knowledge, he said to the architect. All of it, freely given to every species in the galaxy so no one can use it as a weapon against anyone else. The architect's form blazed with approval. It will be done. The city around them began to sing, not with voices but with pure harmony of consciousness. The data cores pulsed in unison, then erupted in streams of light that arced upward through the atmosphere. Above them, the war fleets from dozens of species watched in amazement as the knowledge they had come to steal was instead gifted to them, all equally. Star charts, medical data, technological innovations, philosophical insights, 10,000 years of galactic wisdom flowing freely to every ship's computers. This is Admiral Thekmore of the Vrex Hegemony, came a transmission that Sarah picked up on her scanner. All vessels stand down. The humans have made this battle pointless. Similar transmissions echoed from across the gathered fleets. When the prize was freely shared, there was nothing left to fight over. Emma squeezed Jake's hand. I have to go now, Dad. I know. Jake knelt again, memorizing every detail of her face. Will I see you again? Every time you help someone, the way you helped that scary kitty, she said, grinning and pointing at the Nexar beast. Every time you choose love over fear, every time you do something that makes me proud to be your daughter. She began to fade, but her smile remained bright. Until the very last moment, I love you, Dad. I love you too, Emma, forever. And then she was gone. But the warmth of her presence remained in Jake's heart like a permanent sunrise. The architect placed a gentle hand on Jake's shoulder. She will be waiting for you when your own journey ends, Commander. But that day is still far in the future. You have much work to do. Jake wiped his eyes and stood looking out at the galaxy that had just changed forever. What kind of work? Sarah answered, her scanner showing readings that made her grin. According to this, every species in the galaxy just received complete medical databases. Do you know what this means? The Crimson Plague that's been ravaging the Outer Rim? Jake realized. There's probably a cure in those databases. Not probably, the architect confirmed. Certainly, along with treatments for diseases that haven't been discovered yet, and solutions to environmental problems that threaten a dozen worlds. Jake looked up at the sky, where the human fleet was now broadcasting messages of cooperation to the other species. no longer enemies but potential partners in exploration and healing. So what happens now? Now, the architect said, beginning to fade. As its ancient task finally came to completion, humanity takes its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors but as the teachers my people always hoped to find. The ancient city began to fade as well, its purpose fulfilled, leaving behind only the original arena structure, but transformed, no longer a place of death, but of learning. Jake picked up his dog tags, feeling Emma's love still glowing within them, and looked at Sarah. Ready to go home? Which home? She asked with a smile. Earth seems awfully small after all this. Jake considered this as they walked toward where the human shuttles were landing to retrieve them. Home is wherever we can do the most good, he decided. The Nexar beast padded along beside them, apparently having decided that Jake's pack was worth joining permanently. Above them, the first joint task forces of multiple species were already forming, united by shared knowledge and the example of a human who had chosen love over fear. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies all reality, a 12-year-old girl smiled and knew that her father would be just fine. Epilogue. 6 months later, the medical station orbiting Proxima Centauri b buzzed with activity as doctors from 17 different species worked side by side, using the knowledge from the arena's databases to treat patients who had been considered incurable just months before. Jake floated in the station's zero-gravity observation lounge, watching a Vrex physician gently examine a human child whose rare genetic condition was finally responding to treatment. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had wanted to see him executed was now saving human lives. Commander Morrison? A young voice interrupted his thoughts. Jake turned to see Dr. Lisa Park, one of the human physicians who had volunteered for the Joint Medical Initiative. She was barely out of medical school, but her enthusiasm for xenobiology had made her invaluable to the cross-species teams. "How's our patient doing?" Jake asked, referring to the child they'd been monitoring. "Full recovery expected within the week," Dr. Park beamed. "The Virex biochemical approach combined with human surgical techniques has been incredibly effective. We've saved 43 children with similar conditions across 5 different species." Jake nodded, feeling the familiar warmth in his chest where Emma's memory lived. Every life saved was a gift to her memory. "There's something else," Dr. Park continued. "We've received a communication from Earth. They want you to come home for a ceremony." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What kind of ceremony?" "The kind where they give you medals and call you a hero," Sarah's voice came from behind him. She glided into the lounge, moving with the easy grace of someone who'd spent months in zero gravity. "The president wants to award you the Medal of Honor." "For doing what anyone would have done," Jake protested. "No," Sarah corrected gently, "for doing what only you could have done. The galactic alliance we have now, the medical breakthroughs, the peaceful cooperation between species that were ready to go to war. None of that happens without your choice in the arena." Through the observation window, Jake could see the Nexar beast that had followed him from the arena. It had taken up residence in the station's cargo bay, apparently content to serve as an unofficial mascot for the medical teams. Children from half a dozen species came to visit it daily, and it seemed to enjoy the attention. "I'm not going back to Earth," Jake said finally. Both women looked at him in surprise. "Jake," Sarah said carefully, "it's a great honor. And don't you want to see your home again?" "Earth will always be my home," Jake replied, touching his dog tags. "But Emma taught me something important. Home isn't just where you come from. It's where you're needed most." He gestured toward the medical bays where the impossible was happening. Daily, former enemies working together, sharing knowledge and resources, building something better than any of them could achieve alone. "Besides," he added with a smile, "I have a feeling our work here is just getting started." Dr. Park's communicator chirped with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression growing excited. "Commander, we just received a distress call from the Andromeda relay station. There's been an outbreak of something called the crystal fever among the Zephyrian colonies. They're requesting immediate medical assistance. Jake looked at Sarah, who was already pulling up star charts on her tablet. Andromeda Relay is a 3-week journey at maximum warp, Sarah calculated. We'd need to assemble a full medical team, coordinate with the Galactic Council for safe passage. Or, came a new voice from the lounge entrance, you could accept the offer I'm about to make. They turned to see Admiral Patricia Reeves floating in the doorway. She looked older than Jake remembered, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult decisions and hard-won wisdom. Admiral, Jake said neutrally. He hadn't spoken to her since the arena incident, though he'd heard she'd been stripped of her command and reassigned to diplomatic service. Commander Morrison, Dr. Chen. Reeves nodded to them both. I've been authorized by the Colonial Administration to offer you command of the UES Mercy, our first dedicated hospital ship, equipped with medical technology from 17 different species. She moved further into the lounge, her expression earnest. The Mercy is fast enough to reach Andromeda in 4 days, with medical facilities that could treat thousands of patients simultaneously. It comes with a full crew of volunteers from across the galaxy. Jake studied her face, looking for any sign of the ambitious officer who had orchestrated his original mission. What he saw instead was someone who had learned the same lesson he had, that true strength came from helping others, not conquering them. What's the catch? Sarah asked skeptically. No catch, Reeves replied. Just an opportunity to do what you've been doing here, but on a larger scale. The galaxy is a big place, Dr. Chen. There are a lot of people who need help. Jake thought about Emma, about the choice she would want him to make. One condition, he said finally. Name it. The Nexar beast comes with us. Non-negotiable. Reeves blinked in surprise, then smiled. The first genuine smile Jake had ever seen from her. I'll have the crew quarters modified to accommodate our unusual crew member. Dr. Park was practically bouncing with excitement. Commander, do you know what this means? We could establish mobile medical stations throughout the galaxy. We could respond to crises before they become catastrophes. Jake felt Emma's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder, and he knew what his answer had to be. When do we leave? The Mercy is docked at Station 7, Reeves said. You can transfer over whenever you're ready. As they prepared to leave the observation lounge, Jake took one last look at the medical station that had become his second home. Doctors and patients from dozens of species worked together in harmony, proving every day that the barriers between different forms of life were far less important than their similarities. Emma would love this, he said quietly to Sarah. She does love this, Sarah corrected gently. Every time you help someone, every life you save, she's part of that. That's how love works, Jake. It doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to make the universe better. Jake nodded, understanding finally settling in his heart like a missing puzzle piece finding its place. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers in equal measure. There would be new challenges, new crises, new opportunities to make, the choice between fear and love. But Jake Morrison was no longer the man who had left Earth on a mission of first contact. He was something more now, a bridge between species, a healer, a father whose love had transformed not just himself, but the entire galaxy. 3 hours later, Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Mercy, watching as the stars stretched into lines of light around them. The ship was unlike anything Earth had ever built, sleek and organic-looking, with medical bays that could adapt to the physiological needs of any known species. Sarah worked at the navigation console, coordinating with Zephyrian authorities about the crystal fever outbreak. Dr. Park bustled between medical stations, checking equipment and supplies with the enthusiasm of someone living their dream. In the cargo bay below, the Nexar beast had settled into its new home with characteristic adaptability. Jake had visited it before departure, and the creature had greeted him with that familiar purr that still seemed impossible from something so fearsome-looking. "Commander," came a voice from the communication station. Jake turned to see Lieutenant Torres, a young officer who had volunteered for the mission despite having no prior experience with alien contact. "We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian colonies. They're Singing. The bridge speakers filled with a harmony unlike anything Jake had ever heard. Crystalline voices weaving together in patterns that seemed to resonate in his bones. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. "It's a morning song," Dr. Park said softly, her xenobiology training allowing her to interpret the meaning. "They're singing for the ones they've lost to the fever." Jake felt his dog tags grow warm against his chest. "How long until we reach them?" 3 days, 18 hours at current speed, Sarah reported. "Too long," Jake said, making a decision that would have terrified him 6 months ago. "Can we push the engines harder?" The Mercy's propulsion system uses technology from the arena databases, Lieutenant Torres said, consulting his readouts. "According to these specifications, we could achieve nearly twice our current speed, but what? The stress on the hull would be significant, and we've never tested these systems at maximum capacity." Jake looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, human and alien alike, all united in their desire to help those in need. This was what Emma had wanted him to find, he realized. Not just purpose, but family. "Do it," he ordered. "But monitor the hull integrity every minute. At the first sign of structural stress, we drop back to normal speed." "Yes, sir." The Mercy surged forward, stars blurring past at velocities that should have been impossible. Jake felt the ship respond like a living thing, eager to fulfill its purpose. "Commander," Dr. Park said, studying her medical readouts. "I'm reading some interesting data about crystal fever from the arena databases. It's not actually a disease in the traditional sense." "What do you mean?" "It's a crystallization of emotional trauma," she explained, her voice growing excited as she worked through the implications. "The Zephyrians are silicon-based life forms. When they experience profound grief or loss, their bodies literally begin to turn to crystal, starting from the inside out." Sarah looked up from her navigation console. "So it's not contagious in the normal sense, it's psychological." "Exactly. Which means traditional medicine won't help them. They need..." Dr. Park paused, looking at Jake with sudden understanding. "They need what you gave the Nexar beast. They need to feel love instead of fear." Jake felt the truth of it resonate through his entire being. This wasn't just a medical mission. It was exactly the kind of test the arena would have created. If the arena still existed. "How many Zephyrians are affected?" he asked. "According to the latest reports, over 3,000 in the primary colony, with the number growing daily," Lieutenant Torres reported grimly. Jake closed his eyes, feeling for Emma's presence. She was there, as she always was, a warm light in the darkness of space. "What would you do, kiddo?" he asked silently. The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Emma at age 8, comforting a classmate whose pet had died, sitting with them in silence until their tears turned to smiles as she shared stories about her own lost hamster. Sometimes the best medicine was simply not being alone with your pain. "Change of plans," Jake announced. "Dr. Park, I want you to research everything we have about Zephyrian culture, psychology, family structures. Sarah, coordinate with their authorities. I want to know about every individual who's been affected. Names, relationships, what losses triggered their crystallization." "Jake," Sarah said carefully, "there are 3,000 of them. Even if we could treat the psychological trauma, we don't have enough medical staff to provide individual counseling to everyone." "We're not going to counsel them," Jake replied, his plan crystallizing in his mind like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. "We're going to connect them." He turned to address the entire bridge crew. "The Zephyrians are dying because they feel isolated in their grief. But grief shared is grief halved. If we can help them see that their losses are part of a larger pattern of love, that remembering the dead is how we keep them alive, then maybe we can reverse the crystallization process." Dr. Park was already pulling up cultural data on her screens. "Commander, this could work. Zephyrian psychology is based on harmonic resonance. They literally think and feel in concert with each other. If we could get them to sing together again." "Not just sing," Jake said, touching his dog tags. "Remember together. Celebrate together. Show them that love doesn't die when someone does. It just changes form." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. The crew worked around the clock, learning about Zephyrian culture, studying the progression of crystal fever, and planning what Jake privately thought of as the most important concert in galactic history. When they finally dropped out of warp, at the Zephyrian colonies, the sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. The primary colony was a city of living crystal, built into the cliffs of a world that sang with harmonic frequencies. But now, portions of the city had gone silent, their crystalline structures turning dull and lifeless as the inhabitants within succumbed to their grief. "My God," breathed Lieutenant Torres. "It's like the city itself is dying." Jake opened a communication channel to the colony's leadership. "This is Commander Morrison of the UES Mercy. We're here to help." The response came in the form of that same haunting harmony they had heard 3 days ago, but weaker now, fractured. "We welcome you, Bridge Builder," came the translated words of the colony's harmonic speaker. "But we fear you have come too late. Our people turn to stone with every passing hour, and we have forgotten how to sing life back into them." "You haven't forgotten," Jake replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "You've just forgotten that you're not singing alone anymore." Within hours, the Mercy's medical teams were deployed throughout the Crystal City, but they weren't treating patients in the traditional sense. Instead, they were gathering stories. Jake found himself in the city's central harmonic chamber, a vast crystalline cathedral where the Zephyrians had once gathered to sing their communal songs. Now it stood nearly empty, with only a few dozen Zephyrians present, their bodies already showing the telltale signs of crystallization, fingers and toes turning transparent, voices becoming flat and monotone. "Tell me about the ones you've lost," Jake said simply, his words amplified by the chamber's acoustics. At first there was only silence. Then slowly one Zephyrian began to speak, about a mate who had died in a mining accident, about songs they would never sing together again. Jake listened, and as he listened, he felt the familiar warmth in his chest. Without thinking, he began to speak about Emma, about her laughter, her curiosity, her fierce determination to make the world better even when she was dying. Something magical happened in that moment. The Zephyrian's voice, which had been flat and lifeless, began to resonate with harmonics. Other Zephyrians started to share their own stories of loss, and their voices joined the growing chorus. But the real miracle came when Jake realized he wasn't the only one listening. Through the communication arrays Dr. Park had set up, the stories were being broadcast throughout the galaxy. On the human medical station at Proxima Centauri, patients and doctors alike stopped their work to listen. Vrex warriors paused in their training to hear tales of love that transcended death. Even the rebuilt arena, now a center for learning and cultural exchange, filled with beings from dozens of species who came to hear the Zephyrian remembrance. "Commander," Sarah's voice came through his earpiece, filled with wonder. "We're receiving transmission from across the galaxy. Every species, every world we've helped, they're all sharing their own stories of loss and love." The harmonic chamber began to fill with voices, not just Zephyrian voices, but a chorus that spanned the stars. Humans spoke of departed family members. Vrex clicked out rhythms that told of fallen warriors. Delphans sang liquid melodies about mates who had returned to the cosmic ocean. And in that moment, Jake understood what the architect had really been trying to teach the galaxy all those millennia ago. Love wasn't just about the bonds between individuals. It was about the connections between all living things, the recognition that every consciousness was part of a larger symphony that played across space and time. The crystallization process in the affected Zephyrians began to reverse. Transparent, fingers regained their natural opacity. Flat voices found their harmonics again. The crystal city itself seemed to brighten, resonating with renewed life. But the most remarkable moment came when Jake heard a familiar voice join the galactic chorus. Young, clear, and impossibly present. "Hi, Dad." Emma's voice came not from his memories or his dog tags, but from the harmonic resonance of the chamber itself, as if the combined love of every species in the galaxy had given her a way to speak across the impossible distance between life and death. "I'm so proud of you," she continued, her words weaving seamlessly into the symphony of remembrance. You found them, didn't you? You found your family among the stars. Jake looked around the chamber at the faces surrounding him. Zephyrians whose lives he had helped save, human crew members who had followed him across the galaxy, alien species, who had become friends and colleagues rather than strangers. Yeah, kiddo, he whispered, knowing somehow that she could hear him. I found them. The harmonic ceremony continued for hours, with more species joining the galactic remembrance as word spread. By the time it ended, the Zephyrian colonies had been completely healed, but something even more important had happened. The galaxy had learned to grieve together, and in doing so had discovered that love was the only force in the universe that grew stronger when it was shared. As Jake prepared to leave the Crystal City with his crew, the harmonic speaker approached him with a gift, a small crystal that pulsed with the same warm light as his dog tags. This contains the resonance of today's ceremony, the speaker explained, so that wherever you go in the galaxy, you will carry with you the voices of all who remember their loved ones with joy rather than sorrow. Jake accepted the crystal, feeling its weight as both gift and responsibility. There will be other crises, he said to the speaker. Other worlds that need help. Yes, the speaker agreed. But now they will not face them alone. Today, you taught the galaxy how to be a family. As the Mercy departed the Zephyrian system, Jake stood once again on the bridge watching the stars stretch into lines of light. But this time, he wasn't alone. Sarah worked beside him. Dr. Park coordinated with medical stations across 3 sectors, and Lieutenant Torres managed communications with what had become an informal network of worlds dedicated to helping others. In the cargo bay, the Nexar beast had apparently made friends with a young Zephyrian who had asked to join their mission. The two of them could be seen through internal monitors, the massive predator and the crystalline being sharing what looked like a complex game involving colored lights and harmonic frequencies. So, Sarah said, settling into the chair beside Jake's command position, where to next? Jake consulted the mission reports that had been flooding in since the Zephyrian ceremony. Requests for help from dozens of worlds, each believing that the crew of the Mercy could work the same kind of miracle they had witnessed. The Rigel system is reporting an outbreak of something called memory plague, he said, reading from the list. Apparently, it's causing entire populations to forget their cultural histories. Sounds like another job for the galaxy's unofficial grief counselor, Sarah said with a smile. Jake laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. I think Emma would get a kick out of that title. As if in response to her name being spoken, the crystal from the Zephyrians pulsed with warm light, and for just a moment Jake could swear he heard his daughter's laughter mixing with the hum of the ship's engines. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges that would test every skill they had learned. But Jake no longer faced the unknown with fear or uncertainty. He had found his purpose among the stars, and that purpose was simple: to show the galaxy that love was the strongest force in the universe, and that no one had to face their darkest moments alone. The Mercy jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward their next mission, their next chance to prove that the bonds between living beings could overcome any obstacle. And somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies all reality, a 12-year-old girl smiled and watched her father's ship disappear into the infinite night, knowing that his light would continue to shine wherever he went. The galaxy had found its teacher, and the lesson was just beginning. The end.